Good evening. You've arrived at a quiet place for rest. There's nothing you need to focus on here, nothing you need to understand, nothing you need to remember later. This is a calm science story, spoken slowly and meant to stay in the background while you rest. You don't need to listen closely. You don't need to follow each sentence from beginning to end. If your attention drifts, that's expected. If you notice a few words and then lose track, that's fine. The story doesn't depend on being followed. For now, your body is already doing what it needs to do on its own. Breathing continues without effort. Your weight is supported by the surface beneath you. There's no adjustment required. This video isn't here to guide you toward a goal. It isn't trying to take you somewhere new. It's here to remain steady, predictable, and quiet. Everything you'll hear tonight is based on well-established scientific understanding, not ideas meant to surprise. Not theories meant to impress, just simple descriptions of processes that have been observed, measured, and repeated over time. They'll be shared softly, without urgency, without emphasis. Nothing here is happening quickly, and nothing here requires a response. If you fall asleep at any point, that's completely fine. If you wake briefly and hear a sentence or two, that's fine as well. The story doesn't build toward a conclusion. It doesn't rely on sequence. It simply continues at a steady pace. You may notice moments of silence between phrases. Those pauses are intentional. They're part of the rhythm, allowing space without asking you to do anything with it. As you rest, your thoughts can move however they want to. Some may pass quickly. Others may linger for a moment before fading. There's no need to control them, no need to follow them. For now, it's enough to be here, resting, listening if you want to, not listening if you don't. The quiet science story will remain in the background, even, unchanged, just as it's meant to be. As you continue resting, there's no need to change your position unless your body naturally wants to. If you're already comfortable, you can let that comfort remain exactly as it is. Breathing is happening on its own. You don't need to slow it down. You don't need to make it deeper. Each breath arrives and then leaves without being managed. The body knows how to maintain this rhythm without attention. You might notice the muscles in your face beginning to soften, the area around the eyes, the jaw resting without being held in place, the tongue settling naturally in the mouth. There's nothing you need to release deliberately, nothing to relax on command. Your nervous system understands how to move toward rest when the environment is quiet and predictable. It doesn't require instruction to do that. The shoulders may feel heavy, not pulled downward, just supported, as if gravity is doing what it always does, evenly, without urgency. Your arms are where they are. They don't need to be positioned correctly. They don't need to match each other. They can simply remain present, resting along with the rest of the body. If there's any tension still there, it doesn't need to disappear. The body doesn't require total relaxation in order to rest. It only needs time and a lack of demand. Your chest continues to rise and fall. The pace may change slightly from one breath to the next. That's normal. Breathing adjusts continuously without being asked. Lower in the body, the abdomen moves gently with each breath. There's no need to hold it in, no need to guide it. It responds naturally to pressure and release. Your legs are supported by the surface beneath you. Their weight is already being carried. There's nothing to balance, nothing to keep upright. The feet don't need attention.
They don't need to feel warm or light or heavy. They can remain exactly as they are, quiet and unremarkable.
As these sensations stay steady, the brain begins to notice the absence of urgency. There's no task waiting, no response required, no signal that something needs to change. This is often when mental activity starts to slow, not because it's being forced to, but because there's nothing pressing to react to. Thoughts may still appear. They might be fragments of the day, images, unfinished sentences. They don't need to be pushed away. They don't need to be followed. They can pass through the mind the way sounds pass through a quiet room, present for a moment, then gone. If your attention drifts away from these words, that's completely fine. The body doesn't rely on constant input. It responds just as well to consistency and tone. The voice you're hearing isn't here to guide you somewhere specific. It's here to remain steady, providing a constant reference point, something predictable enough that the mind doesn't need to stay alert. There's nowhere else to be. Nothing else to prepare for. The night doesn't require readiness. You can continue resting exactly as you are, breathing, supported, unchanged. The body already knows how to do this. As the body remains supported and still, attention often becomes less focused on specific sensations. It doesn't disappear, it simply spreads out, becoming less defined. There's no clear moment when this shift happens, no signal to mark it. It unfolds gradually, without announcement. In many natural systems, change works this way, not through sudden steps, but through slow transitions that are easy to overlook. As evening moves into night, light fades without a precise boundary. There isn't a single moment when day becomes night. Brightness decreases little by little until it's no longer noticeable. Temperature changes follow a similar pattern. Air cools slowly. Surfaces release heat over time. Nothing switches off all at once. Sound, too, tends to soften gradually. Activity decreases. Distances feel larger. Individual noises become harder to separate from one another. These shifts don't require coordination. They don't respond to attention. They continue whether or not anyone is watching. The body is familiar with this kind of rhythm. It developed within environments shaped by repetition and slow variation, not constant alertness. Because of that, predictable changes tend to feel safe. They don't demand quick reactions. They don't signal urgency. When the environment becomes more consistent, the nervous system often responds by reducing effort. There's less to monitor, less to prepare for. This doesn't happen because something is being controlled. It happens because there's nothing asking for control. In science, many processes behave in the same steady way. Large systems often change slowly, guided by consistent forces rather than sudden impulses. Once those systems settle into stable patterns, they can remain there for long periods of time, sometimes for hours, sometimes for much longer. These patterns don't need supervision. They don't require adjustment. They continue simply because the conditions around them remain steady. When described carefully, these processes don't contain surprises. There's nothing hidden behind the explanation, no outcome waiting to be revealed. Just continuity. In the background of daily life, countless slow processes are always underway. They don't interrupt. They don't compete for attention. They form a quiet foundation beneath faster events. As attention softens, it doesn't need to track details closely. It doesn't need to organize what it hears. It can remain open without effort. Images may appear on their own. They don't need to be held in place. If they fade, that's fine too. What matters more is the sense of steadiness, the feeling of things moving at a pace that doesn't rush toward an outcome. In this state, time often becomes less structured. Minutes don't need to be counted. There's no sequence to follow. The voice continues at an even pace, not to hold attention, just to remain consistent, a steady reference point. Thinking may become less verbal, less linear, not because it stops completely, but because it no longer needs to arrange itself around tasks or decisions. Rest doesn't arrive all at once. It settles gradually, first in the body, then in the breath, and slowly in the space around thoughts. You don't need to notice when that happens. There's nothing to mark. The process continues on its own. And the quiet science story will continue too, moving at the same unhurried pace as the natural systems it describes. When attention begins to rest more in the background, it can be easier to notice environments that change slowly. Places where motion is spread out, where patterns repeat without drawing attention to themselves. Forests are one example of this kind of system. A forest is not a single object. It's a collection of many smaller parts interacting over time. Trees, soil, air, moisture, living organisms moving at different speeds. Together, these parts form an environment that tends to remain stable, especially over short periods. This stability doesn't come from stillness, it comes from balance. In a forest, energy moves gradually. Light filters through layers of leaves. Heat is absorbed and released slowly by wood, soil, and water. Moisture remains close to the ground, cycling through evaporation and condensation without large swings. Because of this, sudden changes are less common. During the day, some activity is easier to notice. Movement. Wind passing through branches. Sounds carried by air warmed unevenly by sunlight. At night, many of these influences soften. Without direct sunlight, temperature differences in the forest become smaller. Air movement slows. Thermal currents weaken. The environment becomes more even from one area to the next. Forests also have structure, not just in height, but in layers. The upper canopy spreads outward, breaking up airflow. Below it, smaller branches and leaves further reduce movement. Closer to the ground, vegetation and uneven terrain interrupt what remains. This layered structure limits how quickly changes travel through the space. Sound, air, and temperature don't move freely in straight lines. They're scattered, absorbed, redirected. As a result, the forest tends to feel consistent from moment to moment. This consistency doesn't require control. It's a natural outcome of how the system is arranged. The ground plays a role as well. Soil is not a hard, reflective surface. It absorbs vibration. It holds moisture. It changes temperature slowly. Leaves, fallen branches, and organic material add another layer of softness. Together, these features reduce sharp contrasts. There are fewer sudden echoes, fewer abrupt changes in sound or sensation. Over time, the forest becomes an environment defined more by continuity than by individual events. At night, this effect becomes more noticeable, not because the forest becomes inactive, but because activity is distributed differently. Large movements are less frequent. Signals are smaller. Processes continue, but at scales that don't demand attention. This doesn't mean the forest is silent. It means that variation is reduced. When variation decreases, the brain has less information to sort through. There are fewer signals that suggest urgency or change. In systems like this, predictability increases, and predictability often feels quiet. From a scientific perspective, this kind of quiet is not the absence of activity. It's the presence of balance. Processes continue. They just do so without strong contrasts. Energy flows remain steady. Inputs and outputs are similar from one moment to the next. In ecosystems that have developed over long periods, this steadiness is common. Not because nothing happens, but because many small changes cancel each other out. The result is an environment that feels even. When described this way, the forest doesn't need to be imagined as anything in particular. It doesn't need meaning or symbolism. It's simply a system, shaped by physical structure and biological rhythms, interacting in ways that reduce sudden variation. That reduction is part of what allows the environment to remain calm without effort. Nothing needs to be adjusted. Nothing needs to be maintained consciously. The system holds its shape on its own. And as attention continues to soften, this kind of stability can remain present in the background, steady, unremarkable, and unchanged from one moment to the next. As the forest remains steady, sound becomes one of the easiest changes to notice. Not because it disappears, but because it behaves differently. Sound is movement. It travels through air as small pressure changes, spreading outward from a source. How far it travels and how it's perceived depends on what it encounters along the way. In open spaces, sound can move freely. Hard surfaces reflect it. Smooth paths allow it to carry farther. A forest is not built this way. Branches, leaves, trunks, and uneven ground interrupt sound almost immediately. Instead of moving in a straight line, it's scattered in many directions. Some of it is absorbed. Some of it fades before it can travel very far. During the day, this scattering is often masked by activity. Wind moves through the canopy. Air warms and cools unevenly. Small movements overlap, creating a background of motion. At night, many of these influences become weaker. Without sunlight, temperature differences in the forest decrease. Air becomes more stable. There's less vertical movement to carry sound upward or outward. As a result, sound tends to stay closer to its source. It doesn't spread as widely. It doesn't change direction as often. The materials in a forest also play a role. Leaves are soft. They bend and move slightly when sound passes through them. This movement absorbs energy, reducing sharp edges in the sound. Tree trunks are irregular. Their surfaces are textured rather than smooth. Instead of reflecting sound clearly, they break it up. The ground contributes as well. Soil, moss, and fallen organic material absorb vibration. They don't send it back into the air the way hard surfaces do. Together, these features reduce contrast. There are fewer echoes, fewer sudden reflections, less overlap between distant sounds. At night, when activity slows, the remaining sounds stand alone rather than blending into a continuous background. But even these sounds tend to be brief. They appear, then fade. Because the environment doesn't amplify them, they don't linger. This pattern creates a sense of space without distance. Sound is present, but contained. The brain responds to this kind of environment differently. When sounds are predictable and short, they don't require interpretation. They don't signal urgency. They don't suggest that something needs attention. Instead, they pass through awareness without being held. Another factor is contrast. During the day, the difference between quiet and noise can be sharp. Sudden movement stands out against ongoing activity. At night in a forest, the overall level of sound is lower. Differences between moments are smaller. When contrast decreases, the brain receives less information per moment. There's less to sort, less to prioritize. This doesn't mean the forest becomes silent. It means that variation becomes subtle. Subtle changes are easier to ignore. Sound continues to exist, but it no longer organizes attention. It becomes part of the background rather than a signal. This is one reason forests often feel quiet at night, even when activity continues. From a physical perspective, nothing special needs to happen. No switch is turned off, no process stops completely. The same mechanisms are still in place. They're just operating under steadier conditions. Air remains still. Materials remain soft. Structures remain irregular. Sound follows the paths available to it. And in a forest at night, those paths tend to shorten and fade. As attention softens further, individual sounds don't need to be identified. They don't need labels. They can exist briefly, then dissolve back into the environment. The forest doesn't respond to being listened to. It doesn't adjust its behavior. Sound moves, then settles. And in that settling, the sense of quiet remains, not as an absence, but as a result of how motion and structure interact over time. As sound becomes more contained, biological activity follows a similar pattern. Not by stopping, but by shifting. Living systems tend to organize themselves around regular cycles: light and dark, warmth and cooling, periods of activity and periods of rest. These cycles don't require awareness to function. They're guided by internal timing systems that respond gradually to changes in the environment. In forests, many organisms follow daily rhythms tied to the presence or absence of light. As evening transitions into night, those rhythms begin to adjust. For some organisms, activity decreases. Movement becomes less frequent. Signals become quieter. For others, activity simply changes timing. Processes continue, but they're spread out more evenly across time. This redistribution reduces overlap. During the day, many biological signals happen at once. Movement, sound, and interaction occur together, creating layers of activity. At night, these layers thin. The same processes are still present, they're just less likely to coincide. This reduction in overlap makes individual signals less noticeable. It doesn't eliminate them, it softens their impact. Within plants, changes also occur gradually. Photosynthesis slows as light fades. Water movement through stems and leaves continues, but at a steadier pace. These changes don't involve sudden transitions. They follow chemical and physical constraints that operate smoothly over time. In animals, internal clocks influence metabolism, movement, and responsiveness. Energy use shifts. Rest becomes more common. This doesn't mean that the forest becomes inactive. It means that activity becomes less concentrated. Fewer large movements occur at the same time. Fewer signals overlap. From a systems perspective, this lowers overall variation. When variation decreases, the environment feels more uniform from moment to moment. The nervous system tends to respond to this uniformity by reducing effort. There's less information arriving at once, less need to distinguish between signals. This response doesn't require interpretation. It happens automatically. Biological rhythms don't communicate meaning, they don't announce themselves. They simply continue at the pace set by their internal timing and the surrounding conditions. In a forest at night, these conditions remain relatively stable. Light levels stay low, temperature changes slowly, sound remains contained. As long as those conditions persist, biological rhythms maintain their adjusted state. There's no need for coordination between organisms. Each follows its own cycle. The result is an environment where change happens, but not abruptly, where activity is present, but distributed. This distribution is important. When events are spread out, they're less likely to draw attention. They don't cluster into moments that demand response. Instead, they pass quietly through time. From the perspective of someone resting nearby, these processes don't present clear signals to track. There's nothing that needs to be anticipated, nothing that requires preparation. The forest doesn't become quiet because life stops. It becomes quiet because life continues without compression. Processes that were once layered begin to separate. Movement slows, signals soften. This pattern repeats each night. Not exactly the same, but close enough to feel familiar. Because it's familiar, it doesn't stand out. The brain recognizes this familiarity without needing to analyze it. It doesn't need to label what's happening. It only needs to register that the environment isn't changing quickly. When change slows, vigilance can ease. Attention doesn't need to remain narrow. It can remain open without effort. Biological rhythms continue in the background, steady, unremarkable. And as they do, the forest maintains its quiet presence, not through absence, but through balance. As biological activity becomes more evenly distributed, the surrounding environment offers fewer changes to respond to. This shift affects not only what is happening around the body, but how the body processes information. The human nervous system is designed to notice change, differences in sound, movement, shifts in light or temperature. When changes occur quickly, attention narrows. Resources are directed toward monitoring and response. When change is slow, the opposite tends to happen. In quieter environments, fewer signals arrive at once. Those that do arrive are smaller, more predictable. This reduces the need for constant evaluation. The nervous system doesn't need to decide what matters most. It doesn't need to rank inputs or prepare for action. Instead, activity becomes more distributed, much like the environment itself. This shift doesn't require conscious awareness. It happens automatically when the surroundings remain steady. When sound levels stay low and consistent, auditory processing demands decrease. There are fewer sharp contrasts to interpret, fewer patterns that suggest urgency. Vision also contributes less. In low light, detail becomes less prominent. Edges soften. Motion becomes harder to separate from stillness. With fewer strong signals coming in, the brain reduces its level of readiness. This doesn't mean awareness disappears. It means it no longer needs to stay focused on specific inputs. Attention can remain broad and unfixed. In environments like forests at night, this state is easier to maintain. There are no artificial signals, no abrupt interruptions. The sensory information that does arrive follows familiar patterns. It doesn't challenge expectation. Over time, the nervous system learns that sustained alertness isn't necessary. Muscle tone often reflects this shift. Small adjustments become less frequent. Posture settles without being corrected. Breathing continues at a pace set by the body, rather than by intention. Heart rate variability changes subtly, reflecting a reduced need for rapid response. These changes are not dramatic. They're gradual. They don't signal themselves. The body doesn't announce that it's shifting into a different mode. It simply does. This state isn't tied to emotion or meaning. It's a functional response to an environment that remains consistent. Quiet does not instruct the nervous system to relax. It removes the conditions that require effort. When there's nothing to react to, reaction slows. This is why environments with low variation often feel restful without trying to be. There's no need to monitor what comes next. No need to prepare for sudden change. The forest at night doesn't provide cues that suggest urgency. It doesn't demand interpretation. As a result, the nervous system reduces activity related to vigilance. This reduction isn't total. Awareness remains. But it becomes less specific. Instead of tracking details, it holds the environment as a whole. This kind of awareness doesn't require energy to maintain. It can persist quietly in the background. When described scientifically, this response is not unique to forests. It occurs in any environment where signals are stable and predictable. Forests at night simply provide a clear example of these conditions. Low contrast, even distribution, slow change. Under these circumstances, the nervous system does less work. It doesn't need to filter aggressively. It doesn't need to stay ready. And because of that, internal processes can continue without interruption. Nothing needs to be adjusted. The system responds naturally to what is present. As long as the environment remains steady, this response remains available, quiet, automatic, and unchanged from one moment to the next. By now, there's no need to keep track of what has already been said. Nothing here depends on remembering details. The patterns described so far continue on their own. They don't require attention to remain in place. The forest remains steady. Sound stays contained. Biological rhythms continue at the same unhurried pace. These conditions don't shift suddenly. They don't move toward an outcome. They repeat. Repetition is intentional. When information stops changing, the brain no longer needs to stay alert. There's no new signal to interpret, no difference to resolve. This is often when listening becomes optional. Words may still be heard, but they don't need to be followed. They can pass through awareness without forming clear images or ideas. The body remains supported. Breathing continues without instruction. Nothing has changed abruptly. The environment is unchanged. There is no cue suggesting that something new is about to happen. No increase in pace. No shift in tone. The same ideas return gently. Not to add meaning, just to maintain rhythm. The forest remains stable. Its structure doesn't alter from one moment to the next. Sound continues to appear briefly, then fade. It doesn't accumulate. Biological activity remains distributed. No cluster of movement draws attention. The nervous system continues responding to this consistency by reducing effort. There's nothing pressing to react to. From here on, there's no advantage in listening closely. The information doesn't become more detailed. The pace doesn't increase. Everything that matters has already been established. If sleep arrives now, nothing is missed. The processes being described don't progress toward an ending. They repeat. They continue. If awareness fades, it fades naturally. If it returns briefly later, it can drift again just as easily. There is no correct way to experience this moment. Some nights rest arrives quickly. Other nights, it arrives in stages. Both are normal. The body doesn't need instruction. Mind doesn't need reassurance. The steady rhythm is enough. The voice remains consistent. Its role does not change. There is nothing to prepare for. From this point forward, information density remains low. No new ideas will be introduced. The story does not move forward in the way stories usually do. It simply stays. And in that steadiness, sleep has room to settle, quietly, without effort, and without needing to be noticed at all. The forest continues as it has been. There's no shift in direction, no change in pace. The same structures remain in place. Trees stand where they were. The ground holds its shape. Sound still appears briefly, then fades. It doesn't carry far. The air remains steady. Movement is limited. Temperature changes slowly without drawing attention. These conditions don't need to be maintained. They persist on their own. Biological rhythms continue at the same gentle rate. Activity remains spread out. Nothing gathers into a moment that needs to be noticed. This repetition is not meant to add information. It's meant to remove the need to process. When patterns repeat without variation, the brain stops checking for difference. It no longer asks what comes next. There's nothing new to compare. The forest remains stable, not perfectly still, just unchanged in ways that matter. Sound follows the same paths, short, contained. Movement, when it occurs, blends back into the environment quickly. It doesn't linger. These processes don't announce themselves. They don't accumulate. Each moment resembles the one before it closely enough that distinction becomes unnecessary. Over time, this sameness reduces effort. There's no reason to hold attention in place. Awareness can remain open, unfocused. Words may still be heard, but they don't need to connect to one another. They can exist independently, without forming a sequence. The body continues resting, supported, unchanged. Breathing continues at its own pace. There's no reason to notice it. The nervous system remains in a low-effort state. Nothing in the environment suggests urgency. The forest does not react to being observed. It does not change because it is described. It continues according to the same conditions that were already present. This steadiness doesn't need to be understood. It doesn't need to be held in mind. It can remain in the background, where effort is not required. As repetition continues, meaning becomes less important. Details soften. The distinction between one sentence and the next may blur. Pauses may feel longer. Time doesn't need to be measured. The forest remains as it was. Processes continue. Nothing resolves. This sameness is intentional. It allows the mind to stop monitoring, to stop expecting change. There's no signal that something is about to happen, no cue to stay alert. The environment stays quiet in the same way. Not silent, just even. Sound remains brief. Movement remains minimal. Biological activity remains distributed. These conditions don't build toward a conclusion. They repeat. And because they repeat, they no longer require attention. Listening can continue without effort, or it can fade entirely. Both are acceptable. Nothing depends on noticing what comes next. The forest continues, unchanged, steady. And as this repetition holds, there's no need to follow any further. Beyond this single night, the same conditions return again and again. Night follows evening. Evening follows day. The sequence repeats without needing attention. In forests, these cycles are familiar. They don't depend on observation. They continue whether or not they're noticed. Each night brings similar patterns. Light fades, activity redistributes, sound becomes contained. The details are never exactly the same, but the structure remains consistent. Because of that consistency, there's nothing new to track from one night to the next. The system does not reset dramatically. It simply returns to the same range of conditions. Over longer periods of time, this repetition becomes the dominant feature, not change, but continuity. Forests are shaped by processes that unfold slowly. Hours blend into days, days blend into seasons. But within a single night and across many nights, variation stays low. Temperature changes remain gradual. Moisture continues to cycle near the ground. Air movement stays limited. These patterns do not rush. They don't aim toward an outcome. They persist because the surrounding conditions remain similar. Sound follows the same behavior night after night. It appears briefly, then fades. Movement follows familiar rhythms, distributed, unconcentrated. Because these patterns repeat, they stop standing out. They no longer signal anything in particular. The brain does not need to ask what this night will bring. It resembles many others. This resemblance reduces effort. When outcomes are predictable, monitoring becomes unnecessary. There's no need to stay alert for difference. Time, in this context, does not feel segmented. Minutes don't need to be counted. Hours don't need markers. One moment blends into the next without requiring distinction. The forest does not move toward a conclusion by morning. It does not complete a cycle in a way that demands recognition. Night passes, then returns again later. The same quiet conditions become available each time. From a longer perspective, this repetition is what defines stability, not stillness, but reliable return. Nothing in this process needs to be remembered. Nothing needs to be anticipated. The system does not ask for participation. It continues at the same pace across many nights, whether or not it is ever considered. As this longer time scale settles in, individual moments lose importance. There is no single point to hold on to. Attention does not need to locate itself in time. It can remain unfixed. The forest remains present in the same way, not changing in ways that matter, not signaling a transition. Night repeats, quiet returns. And as that repetition continues, there is even less reason to stay aware of the passing of time. Nothing requires acknowledgement. The system remains in place. The rhythm continues without changing. Nothing shifts. Nothing resolves. The forest remains as it has been. Sound stays brief. Movement stays minimal. There is no new information to follow. No detail that needs to be held in mind. Words arrive, then pass. They don't need to connect to one another. They don't need to form a complete picture. The space between them is enough. The environment remains steady. Air stays still. The ground holds its shape. Biological processes continue quietly, distributed, unremarkable. The nervous system remains in the same low-effort state. There is no reason for it to change. Awareness does not need to focus. It does not need to track. It can remain open, or fade slightly, or drift in and out. All of these are fine. Time feels less defined here. Moments blend together. There is no clear separation between one and the next. The forest does not mark time. It does not signal progress. It simply remains. Words may start to feel softer, less specific, more like sound than meaning. That's expected. Sentences do not need to be completed. Ideas do not need to finish forming. Pauses may feel longer, or they may pass unnoticed. The body continues resting, supported, unchanged. Breathing continues on its own, without guidance, without adjustment. Nothing in the environment suggests that attention is needed. Nothing calls for response. The same steady conditions remain in place. Quiet does not deepen. It does not fade away. It stays even. The forest remains present in the background, not as an image, not as a concept, just as a stable setting where change is slow enough to ignore. Meaning continues to dissolve, not suddenly, gradually. Words lose their edges. They no longer point toward anything. They exist briefly, then disappear. The rhythm is what remains. Nothing here depends on being heard clearly. Nothing depends on staying awake. If awareness drifts further, the story continues without needing to be noticed. If awareness returns briefly, it can drift again just as easily. There is no signal to follow, no transition to watch for. The system remains steady. And as the rhythm continues, there is less and less to hold on to, which is enough. The rhythm continues. Nothing changes. The forest remains steady, unchanged from one moment to the next. Sound appears briefly, then fades. It does not carry. Movement remains minimal, distributed, easy to ignore. There is no direction to follow, no sequence to complete. Words arrive slowly. They do not need to be understood. They do not need to connect. They can remain as sound, passing through without forming meaning. Pauses become part of the rhythm. They do not interrupt anything. The space between words is enough. Breathing continues. The body remains supported. Nothing needs adjustment. Awareness does not need to stay present. It does not need to hold its place. If it drifts, it drifts. If it fades, it fades. The environment does not respond. It does not change. The forest remains as it is, stable, quiet in the same way. There is no signal marking time, no cue that something is about to happen. Moments blend together, without distinction. The voice remains even, not guiding, not leading, just present. Words soften further. They lose shape. They lose edges. Meaning is no longer required. The rhythm remains. Nothing resolves, nothing concludes. The night continues on its own. The forest continues. Sound continues. Stillness continues. There is nothing more to notice, nothing more to follow. The background remains, and it stays this way.